Hello, everyone. Welcome to Transform Now. I'm Brad Hairston.
And I'm Michael Marchuk.
And this is the weekly pulse check. We're taking a look at what's happening in the news around automation and AI. Michael, you ready to hit our 5 articles for the day?
Let's do it. These are some good articles.
They are, absolutely. The first one comes to us from Reuters. The title of it is EU rolls out $1.1 billion plan to ramp up AI in key industries amid sovereignty drive. Now, Michael, as you know, there's been growing tension globally around this topic of AI sovereignty. You know, who controls the technology, the data, the infrastructure behind it. And now, as this article tells us, the EU has stepped in with a $1.1 billion plan to boost AI across key industries, part of a broader push to make Europe less dependent on American and Chinese AI models. What are your thoughts on this?
There's several thoughts. One of them starts with AI sovereignty and the capabilities I can kind of understand to a certain point if you take it from a very political stance. Like, listen, that's the Chinese versus the Americans, the Chinese technology, who knows what kind of training they've had on their models. And then the Americans are, ours is better, ours is American, we've got all the best training, and of course ours is most furthest ahead, and puff the chest out. It sounds like an arms race to me kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But when you go back to review some of the aspects of it, I think there's more of a trust and safety angle to that way that the Europeans are approaching this, rather than we want ours to be the bestest. They're looking at it from, I think we want this to be the safest and the most regulated, controlled AI. And to me, there's going to be a challenge they're going to have to push this forward, even with €1 billion at their disposal to support this. Because I think that the main angle behind the way they're approaching it is, and again, there's a right or wrong at this point, but when you have too much regulation on something, it stifles growth. When you have unregulated, you also imperil the users or endanger, society. So there has to be a balance on it. And while the EU regulations right now are, I would say they're pretty stringent in terms of the way the world is looking at them, especially the way the Americans are looking at them. The challenge we have is, how do you encourage growth when you have tight regulation? And so I understand where they're going with this. I think it's important that every sovereign organization out there, whether it's a government or a government-like entity, goes and understands how this is going to impact the way they're leveraging the technologies. I still imagine, we start looking at this. This is a global thing. There's technologies that are, this piece of technology emerges, or this concept emerges out of someone from China, which then gets developed more with someone in Russia, who gets then further developed in a group of, Ukrainian hackers who then export that kind of stuff, and we get it into Europe, that goes to America, and Americans take it and make a product out of it. And then all of a sudden it's American technology. It's not American technology. It's built on a whole bunch of other people's work. Yeah. So the idea that it's specifically a particular sovereign entity's own technology is kind of misleading. Just like we talk about American-made cars, when nearly all the parts are made in other places of the world and then are assembled here in the United States. It's not an American car as much as it is. There's some design work that was done here and some assembly that was done here. I think the same is going to apply here. At the $1 billion that they go against to make this thing happen is going to be a challenge. I think not because there's not enough money, but I think it's because of the regulations that will hinder what their expectations are by using this money. Yeah, that's just my thought.
Well, France and Germany are pushing for open European LLMs, which is related to this. We saw and talked about recently Switzerland releasing an open LLM. And this data sovereignty or AI sovereignty topic is certainly not limited to Europe. The US has been doubling down on semiconductor independence. China has been working on their own AI stack. So this is certainly a global trend, and it's one that we will no doubt continue to see a lot of interesting headlines about.
Absolutely.
All right. Next article is from TechCrunch. Title is California becomes the first state to regulate AI companion chatbots. Now, as generative AI gets more personal, from chatbots to, really become advisors, therapists, friends, and we see this in all the statistics about AI usage, people personifying their AI and using it as a companion, a trusted advisor. As this continues to build, the state of California became the first state to regulate what these AI companion chatbots are doing. And it is a move that could set the tone nationally. We'll have to wait and see. But why don't you break this down for us, Michael?
So the idea behind it is there have been widely publicized stories of people who have killed themselves based on recommendations from their AI companion. So there's a number of different angles you could take in this. One is understanding, well, why did someone get so attached to an AI companion versus a human companion? But we're not going to go down those psychological routes because that is a very, very deep hole. Right now, I wanted to focus on the idea of some of the regulations and what they're trying to accomplish. So the idea behind it is right now, there are very few limits set on how someone can interact with an AI and how that the organization who's created that AI, what the responsibilities are to the users of it. So I guess there's a number of these different platforms. I'm sure you've got many AI friends. I have no AI friends at this point in time, which is, I think I'm friendless on the AI world. But the idea is that these AI companions are ways to interact with, in ways to express your feelings. And by doing so, like you mentioned, a therapist or whatever, your feelings become very, very deep. And the interaction, even though it's you working with an AI platform, become very real. And the platforms that are out there don't necessarily have the same kind of guardrails, if you will, through these interactions that perhaps other types of like a real therapist might have in terms of their interactions.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about this particular rule, this law in California, it's related to making sure that there's age verification, that there's restrictions on how these AI companions can provide imagery back to their users in terms of what's age appropriate. There's also rules for making sure that the user understands that this is AI. You're not actually talking with somebody, you're talking with an AI. And that as part of that whole thing, that there's break time built into that. Like, hey, we've been talking long enough now, you need to take a break. And I think some of those things are going to help, I think from a psychological perspective, to disconnect you from this fantasy world that you're interacting with, because it isn't real. I'm interacting with an AI platform, and now I'm becoming attached to this AI platform, and this AI platform is telling me things and reassuring me and whatever. All those things are, can be really good from a companion standpoint. But then if that AI hallucinates or provides you with something that perhaps could be damaging, or in this case, they've had results where people have actually died based on this, there's some real implications and should be for the organizations who are providing them. So that's how I see this. I think it's kind of scary in a way, because I don't see how people, this is my personal, I don't see how people can get that connected to their screen, to interactions that way. But I can understand if you're in a specific area where perhaps you're in a senior home and you have no family nearby, or no family at all, or you wanted to talk to somebody very about for something very personal, but you really don't want a person to know about it. Maybe that's why you'd use an AI companion. But there's a lot of dangers with personifying an AI platform in a way that you can feel real feelings either towards it or having it, provide simulated feelings that you make you believe something. So,
yeah. Well, the California law, which is SB 243, by the way, reflects growing concern about mental health, manipulation, data privacy, all of those things. And it's interesting to note that other states like Illinois, Nevada, and Utah have already passed laws to fully ban the use of AI chatbots as a substitute for licensed mental health care. So I think, clearly there's concerns about how it's being used, and even in mental health care maybe coming into play. And so I'm sure this is not the only regulation we're going to see coming out here.
I think it's important to notice that the other regulations from those other states, and I'm sure there's other global that have the similar type of approach where you can't approach it and portray yourself as a licensed anything. And I think that's part of the deal here is that it has to be a continual reminder that you aren't talking with a real person here. This is not, you're like chatting with Dr. So-and-so on the other end of this. It's actually just an AI platform who's leveraging all its training to be able to emulate a conversation with you. So again, this is the first of its kind though, from a chatbot companion perspective though, rather than simply, just a chatbot that you use for customer service or that kind of thing. And certainly it has nothing to do with licensed medical advice or anything along those lines. So again, interesting perspective on how our society has transitioned so quickly, in my mind, to say, well, I want to have an AI companion. That's bizarre in my mind, but I know that it's real.
Byproduct. No doubt it's a byproduct of just how powerful it is and how conversational it is. And for people that are desperately lonely and that's the only thing they have in front of them, I think it becomes a quick substitute for human companionship.
Yeah.
The next article is from Fast Company. Title is "The Emerging New Job for Humans AI Just Created." Michael, we keep hearing all the time that AI is eliminating jobs, but it's also creating new ones. This may be the first article we've discussed, though, about a specific new role that has emerged, the AI automation engineer. And I think it's a pretty interesting one. What's your take?
So the idea behind this is that, and this, we've talked about this in a number of different ways before, but the idea behind it is someone who has a current role in their organization is very, very well versed on the domain expertise that they have in that area, and leveraging AI to support that within that area, taking your domain, your personal domain expertise, and helping to build automations around that in ways that you stay in your domain, but now you have this additional IT expertise. So the article goes on and talks about an HR person who becomes this AI automation engineer, where they leverage AI within their role in HR. So they're squarely in HR, but they are now taking AI and taking the technology component of it and broadening the way they apply it within their role, which has now changed from simply doing HR work to be doing automation work related to HR.
Right.
And we've seen this in the past where there's been centers of excellence within an organization created for, automation in general, RPA automation. This was a very common one. And that RPA automation tended to be more IT focused. And while there are teams within the businesses who could contribute and could understand some of the things, oftentimes that COE would still live within IT. And the business users would approach the folks in the Center of Excellence to have things done for them. This, because of the way we interact now with our LLMs and our AI platforms, is a lot more conversational. You can create prompting, which is natural language, to be able to accomplish these things. Now it becomes a lot more accessible for folks who aren't necessarily in IT. So it's broadening the viewpoint. I think there's a lot of activities that are yet to be defined in terms of how that interaction happens, because it is a sort of a hybrid role. This person indicated, hey, I'm still in HR, but I have a lot of IT activities that I have to be supporting in order to make my HR automations operational and functional. So it is a transition, and I think we're going to see more of these types of transitions where we see domain expertise bleed over into technical expertise, just because it has to, because we're seeing such an expansion of the capabilities of AI, but also the needs for these individual domains to accept and really take on ownership of this kind of platform.
Yeah, this article did a really good job of talking about the skills that are needed for this new role, like proficiency with no code, low code tools, prompt engineering, understanding responsible AI, process mapping, workflow optimization, collaboration, communication skills. Michael, that sounds like you, my friend. I think you should be an AI automation engineer. And I also think about some of our customers. Jesse Tutt comes to mind. He's got all these skills. He's essentially doing this role today. So yeah, this is, I think it's an optimistic article about something new that has emerged that I think will apply to a lot of people in this field, in this profession. And hey, it gives all of us a chance to add engineer to our title. I'm sure my son, who has a master's degree in mechanical engineering, is going to love that dad's calling himself an engineer. He's going to really appreciate that.
I'm sure he will.
All right, next article. And this one really made me take pause. It's from Time magazine. The article is titled, "The World's First AI-Powered Minister Tests the Future of Government." I had to, like I said, take pause on this one. This is about the country of Albania. So they recently appointed a minister of state for artificial intelligence, and its name is Diela, which is Albanian for sun, S-U-N. It is an AI-generated system, no human behind it, and they've tasked it with tackling corruption in government contracting. So they literally have had meetings with the government cabinet, and you have a screen behind them with Diela in the form of a female who's joining the meeting, but very careful to say, I'm not human, but this is my role. Well, this move has sparked outrage and legal challenges, and it's raised a lot of deep questions. So should a non-human entity yield political power? What do you think, Michael?
Well, I'll answer the question. No, we'll start with that.
Okay.
The article does mention that while all of this has been provided or has been created, it is mainly symbolic at the moment. But because a cabinet minister would actually have power. In this case here, the AI doesn't necessarily have specific powers over something other than to do the investigations into this fraud thing. So it's really a role, and the role that was created evidently has been given this role, this title of a minister within the government. So I think, just to answer your question, no, AI should not be given actual power within a government setting. However, the ability for leveraging the tools, that government can leverage a tool like this Dalia, makes a lot of sense in terms of, especially within the context they put. So the context in the Albanian government is there's a lot of fraud within the Albanian government, because contracts are favorably going to cousins or people related to those who are creating the requests for these things. So a road contract comes up, and I got a cousin in the business, and it sounds a lot like the mob, where, hey, I got a cousin who can take care of this, and we're going to make sure that they get the contract, and of course it's going to be all good for y'all. This is where I think they're coming up to it, because they actually mentioned, the AI doesn't have any cousins. So it can be a lot more objective the way it reviews contracts and reviews the way these expenditures happen. And that's probably something that we as humans don't have that same level of objectivity. Even though there's going to be bias that's naturally built into any of these AI systems, the reality is that bias may be there, but there's not going to be the same kind of human collaboration corruption, assuming they set this up correctly, to give a little more objectivity to the way that these contracts are provided. So, I think there's an interesting approach to this. I believe at this point in time, this is a lot more show than anything else, but it does bring up some interesting points about how roles within organizations, just in general, whether it's government or private, may be provided to an AI because of the specific capabilities that AI provides. I believe that at the end of the day, any actual actions or power that would be related to this particular role would be then actually accomplished by a human in terms of their actual execution or permission of execution to allow that to happen. But at this point in time, this is a little more show than anything else, but it does bring up some good points to discuss.
My take is exactly the same. I think it would have been less controversial if the government or the governing body would have said, hey, we're using AI agents to make improvements in certain areas or uncover corruption, making it or personifying it as a minister of this and having it join their cabinet meetings and what have you. Yeah, that you're right. It's a little showy and it makes it, I think it gives it a different tone. But I think the use case is fascinating, and I think it's great because, as you said, uncovering corruption there's corruption in every government. There's fraud in every government. Detecting it and uncovering it is often hindered by the fact that humans are human, right? They're influenced by things. And so if they're trying to detect, or if they suspect there's corruption in certain areas, they can be influenced, they can be bought, they can be nudged in certain ways, so that a lot of times it never fully gets surfaced. So here you have more objectivity, although the model has to be trained by someone, so you could have a bad actor training it not to detect, corruption. But in the end, I think it could be an improvement, and it could surface a lot of things that people are just not aware of. And again, they shouldn't be able to make a decision on that or put people in jail, but they ought to serve it up and let the humans make a decision on that.
I do think, as we're seeing with these articles, the personification theme is actually one that that needs to be more fully addressed, because I think it's natural for us. I mean, we see, the head of Abraham Lincoln in a piece of toast, right? We see the Pope and a potato. And so because we look at these things and our mind is trained to see that kind of thing, we are looking for some kind of personification or some kind of image. And I think having the capabilities that AI has, it naturally feeds into that ability that we have as a human to take that next step, which may not necessarily be accurate, but it's a step that we take fairly quickly, honestly. How many of us talk to our dogs and our pets, right? It's just reality. They don't understand us. They look at us and they shake their head, smile, and as long as you feed them, they're happy. But there is an aspect of that where humans naturally tend to do that type of thing, where we are personifying things that don't necessarily need to be personified.
Yeah, that's a really good observation. We could do a whole segment just on that topic alone.
Coming up.
Yes. All right, final article. And again, another fascinating article. This one also is from Time. It's titled "The Robot in Your Kitchen." So we've talked about humanoid robots quite a bit. They've been making the headlines. And Time Magazine recently profiled a company called Figure AI and their new humanoid robot, the Figure 03, which they hope will soon become the first robot for carrying out domestic chores in the home. That's really where they're focused. And this includes cooking. So when you consider all the ways robots could play a role in society in the future, Michael, is having one in the kitchen, is that in your priority list? What do you think?
Not personally in my kitchen, but if you're asking about cooking and a robot accomplishing those tasks, my mind immediately goes to every fast food restaurant everywhere, whether it's a humanoid robot or it's some other kind of manufactured capability. Most of the food that we get at a fast food restaurant is made in a very mechanical process, even with people. So could I see robots replacing that? Yeah. In fact, there's been several who have done that just now. They're at this point in time still more of a anomaly. You don't necessarily have a lot of robots making food in the kitchen these days at these fast food restaurants. But there are some that have been marketed that way. There are a couple restaurants that actually use them. So do I see cooking happening? Absolutely. In the house, maybe not. I remember seeing some meme on the internet, on LinkedIn at one point in time, say, this is all great with AI being all these capabilities, but until it can wash my clothes and fold my laundry, it's really no use to me. Well, now, here you go. You have capabilities where it can wash your clothes and fold your laundry. And that's something that I think we're going to see more of in, again, some of that elder care perspective. The world is getting older. The way the demographics are working, we're seeing this in many, many Western countries. Japan, of course, is one of the poster childs for this, but Italy is not far behind, Germany and whatnot. And it's just the way life is right now. There are fewer younger people having children. So there are many more older people who are living longer and requiring care. And the caregivers become very, very, very difficult to find as we start, going for long-term care, in-home care, that sort of thing. So could I see robots in the house doing these types of things? It's not beyond the capabilities of what we have currently. And while this particular robot from Figure is one of these models, I follow a bunch of these on LinkedIn, and there's several that are actually relatively affordable in terms of, less than $10,000 for a robot that can have some pretty amazing capabilities. We started talking about that. It kind of looks like, we're going to iRobot land here, where we're going to have domestic robots supporting us in a bunch of different ways, which perhaps at one point in time we all would have thought was completely science fiction. But now there's going to be some point where it's not going to be uncommon to see your neighbor's lawn being mowed by a humanoid robot. So, is it going to happen tomorrow? Probably not. But given the rapid pace accelerated pace of this development, and the way that these particular machines, these robots are being built, I really think we're going to see some interesting developments coming in the next couple, 3 years that are going to change our mind about how we would look at necessarily having a domestic robot supporting our household.
I think if the robot could do gluten-free cooking, you would have said yes. You would have changed your opinion.
I definitely would have done that. And I'm sure if you had one that could pick up poop after the dog, even better, right?
Yeah, exactly. This article was, by the way, very long, but it had a lot of really interesting stuff in it. Two things I want to point out. One is it said that these robots learn through their neural networks. They're watching humans perform these activities, and that's how they're learning how to do them. And they said that some of these tasks they can learn with only 80 hours of video footage. I thought that was pretty startling. That doesn't seem like a lot.
It doesn't.
Other thing that it pointed out in the article was this does bring new risk with it when you have robots that are watching and observing and then imitating that. And the CEO has said that his company actually used 3 rules that come from Isaac Asimov's book, I, Robot. And that is, number 1, a robot may not injure a human being or through inaction allow a human being to come to harm. 2, a robot must obey the orders given by human beings, except where such orders would conflict with the first law. And 3, a robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or second laws. Now those are straight out of a science fiction book, and they were actually mentioned in the movie I, Robot, which was a pretty bad movie, by the way. Sorry, Will Smith. But I think it's just interesting that they're using this in their actual robots that are now going through all this testing and all these trials. And you can see how these would provide good guardrails. It's going to have to go way beyond that, of course. But yeah, it's going to take a lot of testing and a lot of trials and a lot of guardrails, probably a lot of regulations to get these to the point where people are going to have these in their homes doing all kinds of different things. So we'll keep an eye on this. But thank you for joining us on the weekly Pulse Check. We'll put the article links for everything we've talked about today in the show notes. And we hope you will join us next time on the Pulse Check. Bye for now.